If you had a time machine and you could go back to any period in chess history, would you be the greatest player from that time? The answer is probably yes. This is the earliest recorded game in chess history. It was played between Narciso Vignoles and Francesco di Castelvi in the year 1475. If you know your history, this is the same time period as Christopher Columbus. Not only that, but coincidentally Narciso's wife Brianta Sanjaniel was the niece of the banker who financed Christopher Columbus's first voyage to find westward passages to the Indies. Francesco, on the other hand, was a lord of several towns in the area of Jativa and Valencia in Spain. He served as an advisor in the Aragonese court of King Ferdinand. But enough of the history, let's get into the actual game, and it is a very, very interesting game. It starts with e4, d5. This is the Scandinavian. Of course, you can push for e5, but in this game, takes and queen takes was played. Of course, this is standard Scandinavian theory. Of course, now you are going to play knight c3 and the queen is going to have to go back. This is still theory, and it was theory in 1475. Here, Francesco still follows theory and plays bishop c4. In response, black will play knight f6 and white will finish its development with knight f3. Now, we are only 5 moves into this game, but it is on the 5th move where Narciso makes his first mistake, playing bishop g4. And this is a mistake because white can play the brilliant knight e5. The queen is not capturable because you can deliver checkmate with bishop takes f7 and the knight holds all the important squares for the king. Instead, black will have to backtrack and undevelop its bishop, but after bishop takes, pawn takes, this position is already plus 1.4 for white. These double pawns in the center are isolated, they're targets for the long term, and not only that, but this pawn blocks in the bishop. This bishop cannot get out, and if this bishop can't get out, this king cannot castle short. It'll have to castle long, but these are all long-term problems that black is going to have to fix, and white is going to pounce on them. Fortunately for Narciso, Francesco does not see this. He plays h3, it's a natural-looking move also, and Narciso takes this opportunity to snap off this knight that can be so dangerous if not taken off the board. Francesco responds by taking with the queen. But this was not the end of Narciso's woes in this game, as he plays f6, a complete blunder. And I don't think you guys need me to tell you why that's a blunder, because this queen that just came to this square now has free range of the b7 pawn, and that is exactly what happens in the game. Now after this, Narciso finds the best move in the position, knight b d7. This discovers the queen's defense of the rook. Francesco follows this up with a best move of his own, playing knight b5. The threat is to take on c7, and although it's not checkmate, this king has this e7 move. It's a very unfavorable move because it blocks out the bishop. You're never going to castle, and really you're never going to win this game if you have to play king e7. So Narciso responds to this threat with rook c8. The best move in this position was bishop d6, and if takes, you take back, and you're actually making a little bit of headway. You can castle now, and although you're down a pawn, you have a lot of things to play for in this position. Rook c8 is only a good move in this position because white can follow it up with knight takes a7, threatening the rook. And in this position, Narciso has enough, and he thinks this knight is far too dangerous, so he plays knight b6, which is an inaccuracy, but you can understand why he wanted to make it. This knight is one of white's best pieces, and with this knight on the board, he could even get checkmated, so he thinks that luring white into trading that off for the rook that really doesn't have much of a purpose in this game is a good thing. This knight can become active later on by jumping up the board and getting to some good squares. Now in this position, white plays the great move d4. This cannot be captured by the queen because the pawn and the knight would fall. The knight would fall with check as well, which is really not what black wants here. Also, white just gets its bishop out. Its final piece that is undeveloped can come along these dangerous dark squares and get into the game. In response to this, black plays the best move in the position, knight d6. This forks the bishop and queen. Obviously, white has many ways out of this fork. Either it can go and protect its bishop, or it can go and check on the multiple checks that are available on the black king. Francesco decides that he wants to trade off his light square bishop, and after check, the knight will capture, the queen will recapture with check, and the knight is forced to come back. on the d7 square to block this check. It is also the best move in the position. After knight d7, white plays the excellent move d5, and we are sacrificing this entire pawn. You might be wondering, not really sacrificing this pawn, are we? We can just take back immediately. Yes, but we might not necessarily take back, because after takes, we can always castle. And this king is very exposed in the middle. This bishop is still in the way of its castling right. It most definitely cannot castle long anymore. That bridge is burnt for black, unfortunately, but if we can get this king stuck in the center of the board, we can sacrifice this pawn, and it means nothing. We're up so much material already. We're going for the king now. In response to this, black gets a little bit greedy and takes the pawn. The engine thinks it's okay, although the engine also gives white a plus 3.8 advantage. It thinks that white is very winning here. Castles, you can get your bishop out. You can even take this pawn if you really want to. Anything wins here for white. In this position, white goes for bishop e3, which I don't entirely like. Thinks it's an excellent move, but it also does think you concede a entire 1 off your eval. It goes from 3.6 to 2.6 pretty much. This move is just not great. I assume that they want to castle long, but castling short was just fantastic here. If you do castle short now, say give white a random move, now you can't check here anymore. It sets up a discovery, sure, but by the time that you get it, black is already going to be castled, and you need to think of a new plan. Black takes some time to realize that bishop e3 was not the most punishing move that white could have unleashed on the black position here, and plays the simple bishop d6. This is a great move for many reasons. The bishop is obviously anchored by the c7 pawn now, and vice versa. This pawn is anchored by the d6 bishop. You could also imagine any world that the queen takes on d5, the knight behind this bishop now is no longer a target if the rook were to come to d1 or long castles. You could also imagine some kind of world in which the queen swings around to e5 and has some checkmating possibilities. In response to this, white plays a pretty curious move of rook d1. I think we're all thinking the same thing here. Why not long castles? I don't know. The engine also thinks that long castles is a much better move. It thinks it's the best move in the position, actually. You're kind of hitting two birds with one stone here. You are getting your king out of the center of the board, and on the opposite side of your rook, you're getting this rook to e1. You're doing everything that rook d1 would have done with attacking this pawn and putting some pressure on the d file. Really just not sure why rook d1 was favored over long castles there. Even short castles was a good move. Just getting everything together and going for one attack on this king with all the pieces on the board. But nonetheless, rook d1 was played in this position. Now, after rook d1, black also plays the curious move queen f6. Now, I can only assume that they wanted this, and they were hoping for, we'll give black a random move. Here, castles and checkmate. I can only assume this is what Narciso was after here, but he doesn't get it. He certainly doesn't get it. After queen f6, the move rook takes d5 is played on the board. Whilst rook takes d5 does stop the threat of the queen coming down here and threatening checkmate, it actually opens up a few tactics for black here. Black can actually play c6 here, and it's just a complete fork of the queen and the rook. And you might be wondering, well, can't the queen just take this? Well, no, because the bishop would play bishop c4 check, and then the queens would see each other, and white can't really do anything about this. The best they can do is block with the queen, and after the bishop takes, they can recapture, and actually black is just winning here, so that would be a terrible blunder. Also, the best move is rook takes d6, and apparently it's actually taking here and forcing the rook to take here. Taking here, and you've got a little bit of equality here, much more than you ever had in this game. The issue is you are just down too many pawns on this side of the board. This bishop is stronger than your knight. You're not castled yet, your opponent isn't castled, but there are just clear advantages in this position for white, and the white pieces would win this regardless, but c6 is a tactic here nonetheless. After this rook takes d5 move, Narciso plays the simple move queen g6. It's not a great move, considering you're down so much material. just targeting these 2 pawns isn't a fantastic move. C6 is really the only opportunity you have to get back in this game. But Narciso sees that this is a weakness and this is a weakness, so he wants to go for one of them. White's best move in this position is obviously just a castle, and then if you take this, it's not actually that big of a deal because you are up so much material. And now it's actually almost an even trade because you have sacrificed a pawn on c2, and now this black queen is completely out of the action. It's offside, as you would call it. This queen is going to have trouble defending. White is going to play rook c1 and just try and bulldoze this. You use the queen being offside as an advantage, and the c2 pawn really in the grand scheme of things doesn't mean much. After the queen moves, say it moves back to here, you could almost even take here, I'm wondering, just completely sack this, and you can't go here really because the queen would check. You would go here and you would get queen c8, and this leads to mate with king e7. Your queen takes c7, the king can go back here, but it would be all over with checkmate. After queen g6 is played, white plays the curious bishop f4. This is a mistake because you can capitalize on this in 2 ways. The first way is that you can just take the g2 pawn, this rook is hanging, and after rook f1 you can play check, and then the bishop will have to go back to e3. You don't win the bishop, you don't win the rook, but you do make, well, this king can't castle anymore. So you've gotten your king that couldn't castle a few moves ago. Now the white king is in a little bit of trouble. You could also do this in the reversed order, of course. You can go queen e4 check, bishop e3, and then you can take the pawn this way. The rook will have to go to f1, and you kind of end up in a similar position, except your queen is on g2 now. And now you can take the h3 pawn, and you can argue you have a little bit more of an advantage. You've gotten 2 pawns instead of the 1 that you would have in the previous line. But both of these lines are fine. White is still winning, of course, because they're simply up more material. But you've definitely set yourself up for better chances in any endgames if you play like this. Now, you might be wondering, Jack, isn't there a third way that you can capitalize on this? Well, if you thought that bishop takes f4 was the way that you could capitalize on this mistake, you would be incorrect, because the bishop on d6 was blockading the queen and rook sight of this d7 knight at once. Before, when this was here, this couldn't take because the rook was not holding it, but now that the bishop is gone, the queen can now take, and in the game, after queen takes d7, the king is forced back to f8, and then the queen goes to d8 for checkmate. If you guys were wondering what chess.com thought of this game, it gave Francesco a 77.0% accuracy in the entirety of this game, and it gave Narciso a 60.8% accuracy. And as far as predicted ratings go, they gave Francesco a 2000 rating and Narciso a 1250 rating. Also hilariously, Narciso got a 12.7% accuracy middle game in this game. He did not play amazingly. He played pretty terribly, really. And in the openings, both of them didn't play too amazingly. 81.1% accuracy and 83.1% accuracy for Francesco here, which for the time was probably fantastic. It was probably a fantastic opening accuracy to be getting, but in modern times that would really be crushed by any, even amateur chess players, in the first 10 moves of their games. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'd love to know in the comments below if you guys think that you could beat Francesco and Narciso respectively in the year 1475. Not only that, but if you could beat both of them, how far in recent history would you be able to be the greatest chess player in the world? Is it the 16th century, the 17th century, or even the 18th century? Feel free to let me know in the comments below, and thank you all for watching the oldest chess game in history.